What's going on, guys? Today in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to cut the mid-length flow, and we're going to complement it with a nice low taper to make sure it doesn't look like a mullet, but just enough to kind of clean up the overall hairstyle. We're going to be installing layers, texture, and some shape so that we can add more of a masculine feel to longer lengths of hair. So for any haircut that we approach, we want to approach it with proper sectioning. This allows to separate the panels so that we can work on each panel individually and to really just cater to each panel, addressing their own unique set of issues. So I'm gonna start by taking a center guide, and what I usually do is I use the nose more or less as a reference, and I'm gonna split all the way from the front down to the back. So let me show you what that looks like. So I'm gonna start from the front over here, and then I'm gonna drive with my finger the first tooth of the comb, and I'm gonna go all the way from the front, and I'm going all the way down to the back. At the bottom here, I'm gonna split. My comb goes to the right and my finger goes to the left, just so that I can start to separate the hair in my line. And I'm going to use the fine side of my comb to groom the hair to each side. Now, when you're grooming hair in this fashion, when you're sectioning, try to have good tension with the fine side of your comb, because if I use the thicker side of my comb, it's not going to catch enough grip to actually lay down the hair. It's going to very loosely comb it, and then I'm going to have hairs that kind of just bulk up and fly away. What I want the hair to actually do is to stick to the scalp. And now we can start to see a little bit more of what the natural scalp is offering us, or the head shape, right? So as I can see right here, my client has a fairly flat crown, okay? In a more quote-unquote ideal shape would be something that rounds off a little bit more, but we have a bit of a flatter crown, which is gonna give us some issues with shape. So what does that mean is if we cut it down too short towards the crown area, it's going to take shape of the crown, and it's going to accentuate this flatness. What we want to do is give it a shape that comes off the head but retains length in areas that it needs to be in order to compensate. So what we're going to do in the back area, how we're going to layer it, is we're going to take a 90-degree section coming off. Why the 90-degree angle serves so much purpose is, like I said, preserves length in areas that are a little bit flatter and caves in, takes out lengths where it protrudes out more, and obviously retains length in the bottom area here where we want to see a lot of that flaring out. So I'm going to separate now the sides from the back and also the top. And how am I going to do this from here? We have our center guide, and we need to work on each panel very individually, starting from the back to the sides and then cutting the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something that we call rounding points. I'm going to take a look at where the rounding point is from the top to the back, and I'm going to section that off in order to get my side panel. So take a look at what I do here. I'm looking at the curvature of the top of the head, and I'm looking at where it starts around towards the back. So I'm going to lay my comb flat on top of the head here, and I'm going to bend my comb slightly so I start to see now where there is space between the comb and the scalp and where it starts to round. So I'm going to take that indicator and I'm going to use this as a reference to separate my back panel from my front. Now, one thing I like to do here is I like to really make sure that the hair on the sides are completely separated from the back, because as I work in the back, I want to make sure I'm only cutting the back panel, because if I'm using this as a reference, as I get here, it's a little bit different, and I'll show you why. Take a look at the hairline right here on the neck, right? The difference of elevation between where I end here on my back panel and where most of my hair is when I'm working on the back panel here, there's a huge difference because it elevates so far up. And why is that? It's because it's coming around the ear. Now you're starting to see the natural hairline that everybody has. It goes from the bottom of the nape and it comes upwards, almost like a climbing staircase towards the ear. So if I cut this hair here the same way as I do here, I'm gonna get a very different result. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna section this a little bit further back to the point where I'm getting all the hair is purely the back section and not affected by this transition area. So I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna start to find the point where it's very much just the back panel, and I'm gonna follow that line up here. Boom. And you may ask, why didn't you just do that from the start? Not everybody's hairline is like that. Sometimes people's apexes are really accurate to where the hairline stops in the back portion here. So now, realistically, I go back a little bit further than where the peak of his head is, so that I can get a really pure, even panel. See the difference? So now I'm gonna tuck this hair here in front of the ear to kind of stay away. Make sure the hair is not resting in front of the client's eyes. Okay, and we'll deal with the side panel a little bit later once we get the other side done as well. I'm going to straighten this line up a little bit and separate it to the top. And I'm going to do the same thing here on the back. I'm going to kind of eyeball it again. I'll eyeball it this time because I already have the reference from the other side. And as I'm visually examining it, I am pretty much following that line that stops right when the back section hairline starts to elevate here. So, great. Now I'm going to separate the side panel from the top because this is just 1, 2, 3 pieces right now. We want to join together the top panels here and separate the sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use yet another rounding point in order to section off my side panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my comb, I'm going to run it alongside of his head, of the side of the head here. I'm going to press it flat, okay? I'm going to press it flat against the side, and I'm going to run my finger along the top here and see where my finger stops. This now indicates my rounding point here. So I'm going to use this as a reference, place my thumb there, or place my thumb here in replacement of my middle finger so that I can use my middle finger to drive my comb through the section all the way here. And I am going to separate that. Now I'm going to look from the front here to see if it's a little bit too high on the head here, because I don't want it to cut into the top of my section, because sometimes the rounding point does very much do that. And in this case, I am very much okay with where the separating line is. There's still plenty of hair on the top, and the sides, and the hair on the sides are really just the hairs on the sides. So I'm going to very tightly keep my comb pressed against the head, follow with my finger behind it to keep that tension. Take out a clip. It's very convenient to have it on your sleeve so you're not losing your tension. I'm going to come from under and I'm going to clip that right there. You can make sure it's pretty far onto the ear so that when you're cutting the back, you're not actually hitting your pin here. We're going to do the same thing on the other side here. Okay, I'm going to comb my hair over with the fine side. Okay, I'm going to lay it flat on the head and I'm going to identify my rounding point, which is more or less right here. And I'm going to drive my finger onto my comb all the way up into the front. And I'm going to comb that ever so slightly forward. Don't be too aggressive with it. I do have a hair clip on the other side that I don't want to ruin. And then I'm going to retighten up the tension of all the hair here. This makes it a lot easier so that when I'm working, I do not have to worry about hair flying out of sectioning clips and all that. All right, now that we have the sides done, I am going to section off the top. What I'm going to do, same thing, fine side of my comb. I'm going to comb the hair into my palm as such. My palm is on top of the forehead and I am driving all the hair into my palm from the back, from the sides, making sure that we have the least amount of hair sticking out as possible so that we can work with no distractions. Do this as many times as you need to. Trust me, it becomes an annoyance as you're cutting if you have hairs flying away, because it might fall into the area that you are cutting, and you might be cutting hair that you really don't want to be cutting. Okay, twist over to my right, continue twisting, fold it back, use my last clip, clipping it with the direction of the hair that I was twirling it in, because if I go opposite, then it has a tendency to push it out of this formation. It's going to undo itself, which is not something that we want. Okay, so now we finally have our hair parted, sectioned off into 4 panels, the back, the 2 sides, and the top here. Now it's very simple for us to work with, and we can now target exactly what we need to target. So my client here wants to have a less mullety look, so we're going to take the perimeter length up a little bit, and we're also going to target some weight that we were talking about earlier. As you can see here on the bottom, it's a little bit thinner. That means there's a lot of layering going on the bottom, and it accumulates to some bulk up in the mid and the upper section here. So what we want to do is we definitely want to be releasing a bit of weight, but we also don't want to take off too much weight from the top crown, because of the reason that I said when we were examining before, is because there's a little bit of flatness and we want to compensate for that. And how do we do that? We retain more length, and then we're going to be taking away length from the midsection right here where it accumulates a lot of bulk and density, and layer it back down to a proper length on the bottom here, to the length where it doesn't look like a mullet anymore. So instead of it looking very, very layered, we are going to actually collect the weight back up to the main top pieces. Okay, and at this point, what you can definitely do is respray any section so that you can make it easier for yourself when you're sectioning and have the hair stick together. Now, your first section that you're going to cut is going to establish the length and the guidelines for the rest of your haircut. So take your time on your choice of length when it comes to your first section. So we're going to split it down the middle. Not directly down the middle. I'm taking a center guide, so I'm going about 1/2 inch or maybe 1/4 inch from the center each side, so I can have a center guide. I like to use the fine side of my comb. The fine tooth side, a lot of people are going to encourage you to use this side to section, which you most definitely can do. But I find that nowadays I like to just make it simple and use the fine side of my comb for everything. It just ensures the maximum amount of tension. Like I said, get it to the point where you can actually stick the hair down so it is not interfering with the section that you're working on. So now we have a center guide here, and now I am going to measure out the layers. That's going to tell me how much length I need to take off, right? So we're going for a 90-degree layer here. What does that mean? My cutting angle is going to be 90 degrees here. Essentially straight. Okay, I'm going to examine the current length here all the way down. Okay, I'm going to see if I were to cut this much hair off, right? Let's say that's about almost an inch, right? That's almost about an inch. If I lay this down, where is that layer sitting, right? Currently, the top sits around right here, okay? When I stretch it out, of course. If I take about an inch, it's going to sit here, right? You see the difference on where it's laying right now and how I'm measuring it. But because he has wavy hair, we have to accommodate for natural springing. So when it dries up, it's not going to be resting here, it's actually going to spring up around here. And for coily hair, and for curly hair, even more so. So the curlier the hair, the more it's going to spring up as it dries. So I do want to take that into consideration. Okay, so I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with taking about an inch or maybe about half an inch of length off, so that when it springs up, it's more so about 3/4 of an inch off. Okay? So I'm going to come from the side and I'm going to take hair, come from the top here. I'm going to start accumulating tension from the bottom and I'm going to comb my hair outwards. Now I'm able to see. Now keep in mind, where my eyes are higher up than where my fingers are. So it's very, very important to ensure that you are in fact 90 degrees. Sometimes when we're in the middle of cutting, we tend to move our fingers as we check or as we're doing something else, as we're grabbing our scissors, and we lose our angle. And now we have more of a graduated line, meaning we are gonna go progressively shorter towards the bottom and build weight towards the bottom, or technically building up, instead of actually doing 90, which releases weight, which is our objective. So just make sure your fingers are at a 90-degree angle, and keep in mind, if your client's head is tilted downwards and you do 90, when he has his head tilted back up normal, you will find that you are actually at a graduated angle. So just keep in mind all these little things, especially when you're making your first cut, because if I have my first cut is perfect, his head can be at any angle, and I will just have, but I will be able to use a very clean guideline and reference from the center. So just make sure that all things are good before you make your first cut. I'm gonna go again one more time to ensure that I have a very straight cutting line. And now I have my reference, okay? Moving my way down to the occipital bone here. And I'm going to notice that I'm gonna take off more hair as I go down because of how much the natural head shape pushes this section out, this portion of my section. So as you can see here, it definitely looks like a lot more hair than it was before from my top, and that is completely okay. This is where we want to take out that weight. Okay, I'm gonna do another check right here. I'm gonna do a checkpoint. I'm gonna grab a piece, and I'm gonna grab a piece on top and make sure that they're fairly even. Okay, good. I'm doing good so far. I'm going to work my way down. Grab hair here from the very last bottom piece. Make sure I have good tension coming out. And cut that last part. Now, I'm going to check now, going bottom, we were going from top to bottom for our initial cut. I'm gonna go from bottom to top to make sure that I was indeed at a proper angle here. So I'm pulling it out now, and I'm already seeing his head is still straight, so I know I'm referencing it from the same position. There are some hairs that are sticking out here that I probably miscalculated, so I'm gonna go back up. This is important. We go 2 times back up from on the first section here. Okay, for the most part, We're good, we're good. And then from the last part right here, now we have a proper check. I'm gonna take hair from the bottom and take hair from the top. And as you can see, it is even. Taking hair from the middle as well. We have our first section done, okay? Now, we're gonna be doing something called pivoting. So it's gonna be a stationary guide. I'm gonna use this same reference from the middle. I'm gonna use this reference for the middle, from the middle, all the way out to both panels here. I'm gonna use this same guide and I'm gonna show you exactly how to do it. And the reason why I do it is because if I use each section going forward as the guideline for the next, it's messing with a different area of elevation onto the head, and I feel like I want a little bit more of an accurate guideline. So I'm going to be using the middle the whole entire time going each way. So we're going to be doing something called pivoting, using pivot sections. Okay, so what I'm going to do is essentially I'm going to be taking cuts out of a pie. Okay, so we're going to be using the middle, and then we're going to go slightly downwards towards the next section right here, like you're taking a slice out of a pie. Okay, make sure that that section is clean out of your way. I'm going to be working towards me, and then after that I'm going to be working away from me after I'm done with this. Okay, so the motion that I want to be doing is I want to be combing the hair towards me on my last groom so that I can ensure what we call a round horizontal shape. We do a round horizontal shape so that we can have more flaring out on the sides when we're styling the hair. If you want something that preserves more weight, we do something called a horizontally square shape, but that'll be for a different video. Today we're doing horizontally round. Okay, so you see I'm grooming the hair away from me, then I'm grooming it towards me. My last groom will be towards me at a 90-degree angle. Okay. Now I can start to tilt this head a little bit and make it easier for me to grab my section because I have my guideline already. And we worked so hard on our guideline that we can trust it. Okay, you may want to push them down a little bit more for this bottom one because it's sometimes a little bit difficult to get tension from our fingers from the last one. Pull away our hair, see our guideline, and cut away. Perfect. Now we split this section in half. Comb that hair away. And then move on to our next piece of the pie right here. All right. Now we're going to be grabbing that section there. Let me just make this a little bit cleaner for myself. Okay. Dragging it out, following my guideline. Now you want to make sure that these two sections, your previous and your next, join together and you're pulling it out from the scalp on base, ensuring a nice horizontally round shape. What I mean by that is don't be dragging it all the way over here and you see how far the hair is coming out away from its position. Don't push it all the way over here. No, just exactly where the hair is coming out from is where you pull out your section. That is how you ensure a nice round horizontal shape. Okay, split that in half. Go on to the next. And this is going to be the same repeat step until we get all the way to the end. All right, so we are on our last section now, and you can see how far we've traveled. And you can see the difference on where I was dragging my hair out when I was cutting from the middle versus where I'm dragging the hair out now that I'm cutting on my last section here. This is also where you might even see that you are cutting off the most amount of hair. Okay, that's one side done. So we are now going to work towards the other side. A round shape releases more weight as it goes to the sides. That's why we get a lot more flaring out than if we were to do a square shape. So now we are going to do the other side, and we are going to do the exact same steps in terms of how we split each section in half and move on to the next, all the way out to the end. So take into consideration now, since we are working away from the head, I am pushing my section into my finger rather than what I was doing before. And let me just show you right now exactly what I mean. So splitting and sectioning off. If I was working towards the left side, my last grooming would be something that combed towards me like this, right? Because I was going round towards the left. Now I'm going round towards the right. So my last groom, I'm going to want to push away from me to ensure that I am indeed rounding off to the right. So now, because of our shape, we released a lot of weight already. As you can see, a difference in the back of the head here. And this is why it is so important to start in the back of the head here. It houses one of our biggest panels here and sets the tone of how the rest of the haircut is going to be approached. All right, so now that we have our back panel, we are going to now work our way towards the sides. So I like to start on my left side first. I'm going to let go of the section and I'm going to re-wet it. Now, as we know from previously, when we were examining his head, we noticed that the side of his head protruded out a lot when it was kind of just flowing down. So we want most of our attention to come from the back, and we want a more slimming shape on the sides. So something that doesn't accumulate too much bulk, but still has enough weight to be swept back. Okay? What I'm going to do is I am going to take horizontal sections going forward, starting from the bottom here. And as you can see, it is a lot longer back here than it is here. We don't want to make it completely even, but at the same time, we do want to release a decent amount of weight. Okay? Going horizontally can be a little bit tricky because you're working against gravity, but don't worry, because you could simply just take any size clip, go from the front, clip it up, and have it be out of your way. Okay, so now we have a section going front, and now I'm going to take a section going back. This is going to be my guideline. And we know that since we went 90 degrees out, I can pull this section 90 degrees out and not mess with the back at all. So we talked about why we separated the hair as we did. So now, as you can see, we are actually starting around this area when we're going to blend the sides into the back here. So now what we're going to do is we are going to connect two panels, the back and the side, into one, pulling it out 90 degrees. And I'm going to use a reference point from the back, and I'm going to use it to connect to the sides. Okay? Now it is important that when you're cutting this, you stand right in front of your section here. If I stand all the way over here, I am going to over direct all this hair that I actually needed to cut, right? that I am taking an inaccurate length if I'm standing all the way here. Body position is very important. It's pretty much your key to instilling the right shape. So I'm going to drag it out, the hair towards me at a 90-degree angle. Okay, I'm going to groom upwards, and I'm going to pull out the hair, and I'm going to start right here so I can really round it off and connect it nice. This releases weight from this area so it's not protruding out. And you'll see that when we slick it back, it will curl up in the back, and I will explain the science of how the hair curls out after it dries up a little bit. Okay, following that. Okay, as you can notice here, my body is starting to move with the hair that's being cut. Over here, we're starting to square off just a tiny bit, so meaning I stop here and I realistically stop turning my body rounding into the front, because we want to preserve more length in the front because it's harder to slick back if the front is too short. Okay, I'm going back again to make sure that my angle is good. Great. Now I've connected it, but I'm not going to fully connect it. The hairs in the front are a little bit shorter because we did taper the sideburns a little bit. So I do not want to follow that pattern, or I do not want to follow it all the way towards the front. I'm going to take about another ½ inch going up, and I'm going to pin that. I'm going to take another section going back on the same level. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to now do the same thing. Pick up hair from my previous section, use it as a guideline going up. Okay, so these two first guidelines, I'm combing up into my fingers. And I'll explain that. Why? It's because I am releasing weight from the bottom and I'm going to build weight afterwards, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay. Guideline, cut. I'm now on the side of his head. Cut. I'm going to stop right there. Going to dial back, make sure I really am round here. Oh. Great. Now, I have about 2 sections left. My frame of reference is usually 4 sections up on each side. Taking my next one about a ½ inch up, combing it slightly down. Taking another section going back. And now I am going to be combing downwards to start building weight. And why do I need to build weight? I don't want to release too much to the point where the hair doesn't have enough weight to stay backwards and to stay flowing backwards. Combing it down into my guideline here. Combing it down into my guideline. This builds up weight. All right. Little end piece right there. And now I'm on my last guideline. I'm just going to stick this right here. Over directing. Not so much over directing, I'm starting to build up weight. Now we are done slick this side back. And as you can see, definitely a lot of weight released, but still has enough weight to stay backwards. Awesome. Let's work to the other side. And on this side is going to be repeating the same exact steps. So now what we want to do is we want to check for evenness on both sides. And what we're going to do is we're going to pretty much just take pieces from the same areas of each side and then hold it up so that we know that we are indeed even. So I'm going to take pieces from, let's say, the middle section here, and I'm going to hold it up and make sure that they are even. If it's off by like a millimeter or two, you're pretty much fine, just as long as it stays consistent. Perfect. So we have a little bit of graduation going on from the top, from the sides, releases weight at the bottom, but then still has enough weight from the top to give it that direction to stay backwards, okay? If we release too much weight, then there's not going to be enough weight for the hair to retain back. It's kind of more so just going to fall flat or fall downwards. And if we built up too much weight, then it's going to round off too much bulk in this area. We are now going to connect the top with the rest of the haircut. All right, so we're going to finally start cutting the top, and we're going to start from back here. We are going to be using the back as a reference to cut the top. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing as we did on the back here. We took a center guide and we're going to do the same thing. Okay. This is about a 1/2 inch section, which is the standard width for any guideline. This plus sign right here. Okay. And we are going to maintain this as we go to each side so that we can maintain accuracy, evenness, all of the above. Okay, so I'm going to be using this as a guideline, but I'm going to only use this top piece right here as a guideline because I don't want to cut off too much, but I do want to release a little bit of weight from that middle section. So right here, I'm okay with using this as a guideline. Okay. I'm going to go forward. And I'm going to maintain a square vertical shape. Meaning, if I'm going around horizontally, I'm going to maintain a very square shape vertically. And what this does is very similarly to the effect of the back, removes length from places it doesn't need to be and retains length in places that we would ideally want it. Because just like the back, do you see a pattern with the hair on top? If you see here, the skull, the shape of the head rounds towards the front. Just like here, how it rounds towards the occipital bone, right? So, in keeping a square shape consistently throughout the front, if you see, because it protrudes and graduates upwards, the head shape, the hairs from here and the hairs from the front are even, But in reality, the hair here is much, much shorter than the hair here because this hair has to travel a lot further. Why does this matter in terms of our hairstyling or in the hairstyle? It matters because it's going to affect the way that it sits as it sits onto the side. So you have to take into consideration the shape both vertically and horizontally. Okay, same thing. Remember, I'm doing a round shape horizontally on top, so I am pulling the hair slightly towards me and joining the two sections together. This will build a heavier curtain bang to give a little bit more of an exaggerated look on that mid part, which is what we want. Following my guideline, okay, and I'm going to do the same thing. Watch how I neatly replace the hair back so that I can maintain my T, my plus sign formation as I go forward and as I go on to each and every section, right? You see that? Maintaining that formation. When I get closer towards the sides, I actually, instead of going straight square, I like to bring the hairs from the end of the section back a little bit more to retain a little bit more length. Why? Because the head starts to round not only vertically or horizontally, but also vertically. So now we are in a situation where the hair is actually getting shorter as we go towards the forehead. That is why we like to use this square shape vertically on top. But more so on the sides here, we want to release more weight from the area that is protruding out more. And why is that? Because as you see it from the front, in order to make a more dramatic mid-part curtain bang, we want this part to be the heaviest and it stays slim so that this is the main center of attention. But if I start to build weight towards the back here and it expands like a bowling ball, it's not going to be a complimenting look. So as I get to my last section here, I am going to be taking a lower elevation than hanging it straight up. It's not enough length for me to cut off because I know there's a lot of bulk hanging around this corner here. Okay, so I'm going to use my guideline, pull it out here. I'm going to start cutting. Okay, I'm going to start going forward. Okay. I'm not using the side as a guideline. It's too short. And I am sort of triangulating. I'm over directing these hairs, I'm pulling it back a little bit just to create a slightly more aggressive curtain bang. And guess what? If it ends up being a little bit too bulky or too long, I can always cut it back down. But one thing I cannot do is grow hair back or put the hair back. So always better to have more length to play around with than less length. Okay, so now I am done with the left side of his head. So we are going to be able to see some of that effect within the shape that we instilled here when we let the hair down a little bit. Okay. As you can see, it's starting to come together a little bit. Very nice dramatic curtain bang to really shape the haircut and to frame his face. And now we are going to work towards the other side, in which we are going to be repeating the same exact steps. But where you might get lost is the fact that we were pulling to one side here and now you are going to be pushing. There are some people that always like to be in the position where they pull the section towards them. So some people like to go over here and start working this way. The only thing that I am not particularly a fan of is that if I maintain that same thing here, so if you want to come take a look, if I take a section going back, or going now towards the right side of his head, or the other side, wherever you start. Before, I was cutting from a position where I could take a previously cut section and move forward to hair that wasn't cut yet. Now, if I go on the other side to still be able to just maintain this pulling action, now I have to cut from hair that I'm going towards back to my previous cut. So I feel like I have a little bit less control on my angle when I'm very deliberate in certain areas on where I want my angle to go. It's a little bit harder to start where I want to go than where I previously cut. So that's why I always just stay on one side when I'm cutting. So the hair is starting to dry up a little bit. You can re-wet the areas that you are going to cut, but it's okay if you start to dry up the previously cut hairs, because now you're going to be able to see more realistically what it looks like when it dries up. So I'm not going to re-wet the areas that I cut before, just the area that I'm going to cut. So going forward now. So now we pretty much completed cutting the entire top, and now we're able to see as it falls onto the sides and the back. And what we are going to do is assess the hair in post, because now that we've instilled the shape, the only issue is that everybody's head shape and face shape is very different. So you could do the same exact blueprint on everybody, but you're gonna have to tailor it down to everybody's specific needs. So I'm gonna look at the hair and see where we can remove just a little bit more weight to optimize the final look. So we talked about how we wanted a nice dramatic curtain bang. So I like the amount of weight that's coming down here. Okay. There's a lot of weight coming from the middle here, just so that we can create that nice effect. But I'm concerned about how it may look on the sides, so I'm looking at it on the sides here. Okay, and I feel like there is some longer pieces here that I feel like can just flow a little bit better. Let's see if it's the same thing on the other side. Yep. As we can see right here on the side, as it falls, I feel like it's accumulating a little bit too much bulk. Kind of like that same look we were getting in the beginning. So as you can see here, we have some nice flaring out, but then it kind of widens out towards this area. And it's always around this part of the head right here. And if we look at it from the front, it's never really always from the front because the head curves in. Head curves inwards, right? It's always towards the point where it's curving out, which is right around this area. So I'm going to teach you exactly how to tailor that area to fit the rest of the style a little bit better. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a section called the delta section. Okay? It's a triangular section that stems from the corner of the hairline and reaches all the way back to the crown. So as you can see here, we're going to use the wall of the hair as a reference and find our angle, right? This wall of the hairline right here. I'm going to match my comb parallel to it, and I'm going to take a diagonal section from the front and all the way back to the crown. So now, other side here. What helps is if you use your thumb as a reference on where you want the section to go. Now, my hands don't reach all the way back here, so I'm really just going to estimate and follow and trust the shape of this wall, this hairline right here. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw the hair towards my hand, towards my palm, section it up, and clip it. Now, I can attack truly where that hair is accumulating bulk. which is the hairs here. And you see if I comb it down, there's a lot of length coming down that we need to release. And I'm going to show you exactly how we can release all that weight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this hair, starting from the bulkiest area, which is this corner here, and I'm going to work my way so that I retain the most amount of length here, because this is not where I want to take out the length and the bulk. This is the area. So if I grab a section here, I'll always have a guideline, boom, right here. If I grab it from this corner of protruding, and I am simply going to curl it up into my hand so I can release weight properly. And I'm going to go and I'm going to be point cutting it, releasing that weight from the top and adding a little bit of texture at the same time. Now, as I release it and it falls, guess what happens? Look at what happens. This is before here. You see how it's very flat and rounds out towards the bottom? And this is after. You see how it's starting to curl out? We just released weight. Boom. Now I'm going to move forward and I'm going to make sure that I am moving away from the front to retain as much length in the front. Okay, because if I was right here, I'd be cutting off all this length in the front that I actually wanted to retain, and it would be as short as this piece right here. Big no-no. You want to triangulate your shape, meaning you want to actually add an angle instead of going straight, okay? Okay, is there any more hair for me to cut? Maybe just that little bit right there. And now we retained weight length going forward, but we released it going back. As you can see now, it is a lot more layered and texture right here. Let's see the effect from the front. And as you can see now, it is not an issue anymore. And just wait till we release the top, okay? And we're gonna do the same exact thing on this side right here. I'm gonna take, starting from this corner right here that protrudes out, I end up taking a little bit of the back section right here. I'll always have a guideline, which is right here, boom, accumulated weight that we need to tackle. Okay, boom. We can completely just follow that angle straight through. Go on to the side, match it with that guide that we have in the beginning of our finger here. And then remember, bringing the weight from the front and then dragging it back over to our previously cut. And then just watch as all that weight just releases. Boom. And preserve the weight going towards the curtain bang right here. Boom. Okay. Release a little bit more weight here. I'm visually inspecting. Okay. Now I'm going to release the top here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect it a little bit since we did take some length off. And how I'm going to do that, I'm going to take a horizontal section going forward here. Boom. Just like that. Boom. And then I'm going to direct the hair here. And then I'm going to connect any sort of disconnection that I see here. So make sure I am preserving length in the front by dragging it backwards. Okay, you see how triangular this is? Because if I were to do square, it would look more something like this. And look how much length I'm about to cut off. I do not want to do that. I worked so hard and did all these things to make sure I have that length. So make sure you treat it as such. So I'm really just connecting the hair down to the weight that I just released, which ends up not being much hair. Okay, at this point I could just bring everything down and see. Okay, do the same thing on the other side here. It's okay if some of these hairs let's go forward. You want to retain that length. You can install the same shape on everybody, but everybody has different densities of hair. So need to be able to assess the areas of density. That is what will separate you from a good hair cutter to an amazing hair cutter, is being able to have that eye to spot those areas of weight and density, because that is how you really chisel it down to your client's haircut, not just the haircut that everybody has. It has a much nicer shape to it and even distribution of length. Now I see that a majority of the width here is coming from the front and not back here, so it's not expanding out. It's actually fairly straight in terms of the shape. What does this do? It gives the client a much more slimming face, or it gives the client a much more slimming effect, which is what we want from a haircut, okay? The only thing that I can see now, just by looking at it, is that there's still a little bit of weight peeking out in the middle here from the round shape that we did, and I'll show you how to assess that. You can take either your scissor, or I prefer a feather razor, and I tackle the wave and the curl that's coming out that I feel like is protruding too much. I take it, I twist in the direction that it's curling in, and then I ever so slightly feather that down, and I don't release the entire thing, but now it's no longer there anymore, okay? We want to do that with other areas of weight. Now this is more of a visual thing. This is not something that you just get overnight. This is something that you really train yourself to see more so. So over the time that you are going to be cutting hair, you will be able to see these areas of weight a little bit better. Okay, I feel like that's pretty released. All right, so I always take care of the perimeter length, which is the hair at the very end. I always take care of it last because I don't ever want to cut it first and then be bound to that commitment of the length that I cut. So I do it always in post. So I re-wet the hair, and I am going to select a length that I feel like does not create too much of a mullety look. So I am going to comb the hair down and see which pieces come out. And so my objective is to really just tackle the middle portion here and then blend it into the rest. So I'm gonna comb the hair down, and I feel like I could take out about an inch of length on the bottom here so that it doesn't look too mullety, okay? So I'm gonna take about maybe 1.5 inches wide section. I'm gonna take out about 1 inch. And I'm going to simply do that. And we can see that the hair is still springing up, and I feel like it's at a nice length now, so I'm gonna continue with that. Okay, I'm following the length. I'm using the guide. You can easily do this with a scissor. I just prefer the razor for a more textured end. When it comes to styling, it's all in the process between wet to dry. So what steps can we take right now as the hair is still wet to optimally dry it so that it sits in the style that we want? Okay, so I just redistributed the moisture in the hair so that every part of the hair is fairly wet again. I'm gonna take my styling product. I'm actually using our signature paste that we use here, and I am just taking about, for this much hair, taking about this much, okay? Maybe about a dime size worth, nickel size. Point is, I don't want to use too much, okay? I'm spreading it evenly throughout my hands. And realistically, you want the hair to be more wet than the amount of product that you have, all right? So maybe a 2-to-1 moisture to product ratio. I could even add more water to the hair here, which is probably what I'm gonna end up doing. So as you can see, I am really getting the product in there from the root up, okay? I don't want to just sit the product on top like this because it's really just going to end up weighing it down. I want to get in the roots and I want to come out with it so I have product everywhere. And guys, remember, I still haven't seen this hairstyle completely dried up. So I may even need to texturize even further. But But we will deal with that when the hair is completely dried up. I typically like to start with no heat first, just to get rid of that initial light layer of moisture. With wavy to curlier hair, you actually want to minimize the amount of times that you use a brush here. So just to get that initial layer of moisture out, I'm then going to switch over to using a diffuser attachment. Anybody that has a Dyson hair dryer, this comes with it. If you don't have a Dyson hair dryer and you don't have the diffuser attachment, you can easily buy one on Amazon and attach it to any blow dryer. So we're gonna go ahead and attach. And what I wanna do is I just wanna work through the entire head and at the same time work with my fingers to make sure that the air is getting through the hair and not just sitting on top like this, okay? By dragging the hair from the bottom, cupping it, and then holding it upwards, it's gonna help with that flare out motion here. As the hair is dried up, I'm gonna look at the back and see how I'm liking the layers. Okay. I'm going to look at it from the front to see how I like the front, how it's sitting right now. You're going to assess whether or not you want to do a low taper on the sideburns here. The way I like to do a low taper is so that it doesn't necessarily look like a full-on fade. It looks a little bit more subtle and just gives a cleaner appearance. So since that is what we are going to do, I am going to go ahead and proceed with that tutorial. If you wanted to give it a more natural look, this is where you would stop. I will show you a way that cleans up the sideburns a little bit more if you wanted to keep it on the natural side. Okay? Preferably, if you have a smaller clip, you can start at the bang, right here at the bottom of the bangs, and you are going to swipe those hairs away so that you have a clear section to work with when it comes to just a sideburn. Now here, be careful where you start cutting. There are hairs that you want to maintain and areas that you want to stay away from, okay? When I'm cleaning up the sideburn, I just want to touch the sideburn. I'm going to start at the bottom of the C-cup here. Take a section downwards, boom, and just separate the hairs along that line. Maybe even cut back a little bit more. Perfect. Now, this sideburn bothers a lot of people, especially guys, okay? That's why a lot of times we do go in with a taper, just so that we can extend the longevity of this not bothering us, because a lot of times what people will do when their sideburns are this long is they'll continually push it back just so that it comes back forward again, and it's a very annoying thing. So if you're looking to keep it a little bit more natural, let me show you a good way to shorten it up while still looking natural. I'm going to take my comb at a 90-degree vertical position. I'm going to take that length of hair, and I'm going to leave the amount of length of how thick my finger is, and I'm going to use that as a distance as a reference to how much hair I'm going to cut. And since we are in a 90-degree layer position, it calls for a sideburn that is shortened up, doesn't have a lot of weight to it, and just sits very, very naturally. Now you can cut this a little bit more and just clean it up along that shape, that same shape that it has. As you notice, I'm going with the grain here to create a really, really natural effect. And you can very much just keep it that way, plain and simple, okay? I am going to release a little bit of weight here from this panel right here. Just because I feel like it's accumulating a little bit too much length. Boom, right there. Just like that, when I push it back, this side here still sits over. Now you have something that looks natural, and it won't really bother you too much. Okay, so I will leave this side natural and I'll do a taper on the other side just so that we can compare the looks, okay? So the same thing, I'm going to start at the bottom of this bang, and I'm going to clip that part up. And I'm actually going to repeat that same step I took. All right. So typically when we do a fade, we're so used to instilling a guideline first with our trimmers, right? But in this case, since we want to keep it very, very subtle and our objective is just to simply clean the sideburns up, we're actually going to be starting with our clipper, no guard, open. And we're just going to be attacking this very, very bottom piece. This situation is going to be a little bit unique to how dense someone's sideburn is. But in this case, since we have a low density sideburn, I don't want to touch it too much. I don't want to go too high. I want to keep it lower than normal. I have a 2 guard here, and I'm going to be knocking off that length right here, right under the C cup. Closing it. Now I'm going to proceed with doing a fade with my conventional methods. This is going to be a little bit different for everybody, but the most important thing is that you start with a no guard open. So I'm going at this with a 1 open, blending into my 2. Okay. Then I'm gonna go in with my half guard, no open lever position. Closing it up. I typically always go about my fades, building my guidelines up, and then fading them downwards. Now that I'm done with that, I'm going back to my no guard open. And I'm using a lot of corners here. When it comes to low tapers on the sideburns here, you want to do a lot of cornering work because you're messing with lower density. You cannot go full on with a certain length. Okay, now I'm going to begin to close my clipper. I'm going to go halfway and bang out this last bottom line right here, which is very, very faint. And unless the client has very dense facial hair, you're going to be going about it in this fashion, very lightly, using a lot of corners, and boom, there you go. The only thing I'm going to be shaping up is this wall right here and a little bit of the hair going back. Once we shape up our line, we're able to see a few more dark spots, so I'm going to be catering to that. Even to the degree that I will take my scissor and begin adjusting my fade that way. This way I'm able to attack certain dark areas that I don't want to go about with my clipper because it's going to be more risky. So I'm going to lighten up some dark areas with my scissor here. And boom, we have our low taper right there. And I'm going to release a little bit of weight from this corner right here because we went fairly square, if you remember. We did it for a very specific purpose, but we go back in post and adjust. So I'm just going to be taking about close to a ½ inch off, not too much. We'll sweep that back and see the effect of that. Boom. Right there. And that is a tapered side. versus the natural side. Okay? This achieves two different looks, but the taper is so subtle that this, on this side, is going to look like this side in about a couple weeks' time. So it's really up to your client what they are looking for. Are they looking for a tapered sideburn for a cleaner appearance, or are they looking to really fit the look with a natural sideburn? Okay? The choice is really up to the client. All right, guys, so we just tapered out both sideburns here. So now we can be able to see the effect of what happens when we just do a subtle low taper on the side. Definitely gives it a cleaner, more of a sharper look, and it'll grow out naturally if that's the desired look as well. So I want to show you guys a few more tips that we can do in post, just so that we can add a little bit more character to the haircut. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at any sort of inconsistencies with the hair, especially the hairs that are flowing in the back here. I want it to be even, and I want it to have as much texture and flaring out as possible. So I am going to take my razor and just adjust a little bit of hair throughout the entire haircut, just so that I can see the hair sit more fluidly, and so that I can see a little bit more texture as well as symmetry in our shape. So as we can see here, my bad, we have this piece sticking out a little bit more than hair here. We have a few scraggly, so I'm going to take care of that right now. Guys, it's really true what they say, it is all in the details. A client may have had this one issue in his hair his whole entire life, and because somebody didn't want to take the extra time to get into the details, when they do find that person, which can be you, they will be super, super happy with the result and your attention to detail and your attentiveness just to the client itself. I still feel like there's still some hair protruding out in this corner right here from the amount of weight that we built. So I'm just going to take my comb. I'm going to take out that section, and I am just going to cut in between a little bit. Release weight, because I actually do like the length there, but it just kind of helps it sit a little bit more flush. Right there, perfect. A little bit this corner here. Guys, these corners are so problematic. Protrudes out so much, you have a lot working against you. So take all the steps necessary to combat anything like that. Okay? A few bulky areas right here. Just going in and just like a pencil almost, just scraping out the weight here and releasing it. You can already start to see a difference. Okay? You could just do it as easily as that. Don't be too aggressive, but just take out what is necessary. Go little by little. Okay? Great. And now one thing that I like to do at the end is a lot of these hairs are being stuck to the bottom of the head because there is still a collection of hair underneath it that brings it towards the nape and the scalp. Okay? Because hair joins together, it attracts. So if we take a look and we lift up the hair here, we see a lot of baby hairs right here. Okay? And these are the hairs that are really sticking a lot of this hair that we have down onto the neck. And it's not letting the flaring out effect as much as we want it to. So we're going to get rid of it. Okay? I'm going to be drawing up the hair. Okay? And I'm just going to be cutting up all the baby hairs in a nice round line. Okay, we're going to go around to the head here, back up. I'm going to cut all those baby hairs off. Now you see I'm not actually cutting off the actual hair, just the baby hairs. The baby hairs never grow past a certain point anyways, so it's not like you are affecting any sort of growth. And just from that, right side we did versus the left side, how much closer that hair wants to stick towards the scalp instead of away, right? Gonna do the same thing. Careful, you don't need to get every single little scraggler. You just need to get up to a certain point to make a clean line. As so. Okay. And as it comes back down, we're able to see a little bit of wispiness on the bottom. Able to see kind of like the hair wanted to come out just a little bit more. I'm going to put another coating of product. So if we I only used about a dime to nickel size amount of product beforehand, emphasis on not using too much product. I am now gonna go with another half amount of that same product, okay? I'm not using any huge dollops, just enough to kind of spread around my hands and to lightly coat the hair, okay? Emphasis on parts like the side to make sure that they stay back, and then getting it in and out of the back so that we can get maximum volume and texture from the back here. Okay, a little bit on top. We just want the product to assist how the hair naturally sits from the way we cut it, not be the main reason why the hair is sitting that way, if you know what I mean. Okay, just a little bit on the sides to tuck it back a little bit, just using it to accentuate the hairstyle, okay? All right, and there we have it. This is our mid-length flow style with a low taper.